On this episode, the World Health Organization estimates that 10,000 kidneys are traded annually.
Many people die every year because of accidents when people are put under anesthesia.
The traditional way is brain dead, but doctors decide that you won't recover.
I like to think that an overwhelming majority of people are good, upstanding citizens.
Are you dead, or are you just not being resuscitated?
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Last month, whistleblowers accused the New Jersey Organ and Tissue Sharing Network of trying to harvest organs from a patient who reanimated on the operating table. The hospital staff refused, but the executives sitting safely outside the hospital told them to proceed anyway. The patient wasn't dead, but someone really wanted those organs. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you are tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Squarick, here with the tangible, the tenacious, the thank God it didn't happen to me, Mr. Tim Phillips. We are your conspiracy realists, back with another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. Mr. Phillips, is this a nightmare incarnate for you? I'm cheersing you with my big bottle tonight.
Oh my God, he's big bottle, and I'm over here. I can't wait to take a sip. I had a preemptive cheer going. I held it for way longer. It felt awkward. It looked awkward, and all you had for me was a water bottle. I'm very
That's it. That's
sad.
it. It's a Water Tales and Conspiracies for me tonight.
You enjoy that?
This is a really weird one because not only is it like timely, but it happened quite literally right here in the state of New Jersey. You had brought this up a couple days ago, actually, as we record this, as something that you had wanted to really discuss, and it's quite honestly been one that's been on the back of my mind really for a long time. For me, it's really spurred off of a docu-series episode with Mariana Van Zeller. I always forget the last name.
Trafficked, right?
Trafficked, yeah, that I've referenced 1,000 times. A lot of cool stuff that happens there, but how like the organ trade is so popular. But you always think these things are arm's length away, and yet here we go. New Jersey organ donor is basically has their organs ripped out of them while they're still kind of twitching on the table.
So what's weird about that, right, is, I was approaching this almost as like, I don't want to say an isolated incident, but to your point, it's top of mind for us because I just found an article about this happening in New Jersey like 2 weeks ago. And so while I was doing some research for tonight's conversation, I just simply Googled, I forget what I put in, something like illegal organ harvesting New Jersey. And I got like a ton of articles over the years. Not that I didn't find even the recent one that I was initially referring to, and I was like, whoa, what's going on here? So it appears as if, though, it could be more prevalent than you would think.
That's a nice segue here. Some background for our listeners out there. If you're just joining the channel, like and subscribe, whether you're on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to, make sure you click that follow button there. It helps us out a lot. But here's what you need to know. Over 100,000 Americans are on the National Organ Transplant waiting list. About 17 people a day die waiting for that transplant. So it's a crisis, without a doubt. And when there's scarcity, there's pressure. And when there's pressure, that's when the rules start to bend a little bit. There are two ways, Mr. Phillips, that you can donate organs after death. The traditional way is brain dead. Your brain completely stops functioning. Machines are keeping your heart beating. It's clean. It's clear. You're dead. You're not coming back from it. But more recently, there's been another way that sort of gained some popularity and kind of exploded into popularity, which is called donation after circulatory death, or DCD. Last year alone, over 7,200 DCD donors made up 43% of all donations. And I use that word very, very loosely here. In DCD, you are not brain dead. You may still have some brain activity, but doctors decide that you won't recover. Keep that filed away in the back of your mind here. They remove life support, your heart stops, they wait 2, 3, 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes here. Then they declare you dead and they take your organs. So,
Yeah.
Mr. Phillips, if your heart stops for 5 minutes, but could theoretically be restarted, are you dead or are you just not being resuscitated?
Right. Well, that's the weird thing, and for me, the key words there were potentially some brain activity, because what does that mean, right? Like, what, like, are you having thoughts? Are they conscious, subconscious, unconscious thoughts? Like, what does that necessarily mean? And so, I don't know, man. If my brain is still functioning on a technical level, I want to keep my organs in my body, dude.
And here's the thing, right? If somebody collapses in the middle of the street and their heart stops, heart attack, stroke, whatever have you, and paramedics choose not to resuscitate them, we don't call that person dead. We call that negligence, medical malpractice, right? So what's the difference now between being in a hospital operating room when organs are involved? It's where the conspiracy starts to kind of get in here a little bit and get a little bit tricky. In 2024 alone, and this is where things got a little freaky for me, DCD accounted for 1/3 of all organ donations. 20,000 organs were harvested after circulatory death, triple the number from 2019. So practice here is skyrocketing. As you said, tons of medical workers, dozens of them now, as you were searching the internet trying to find an article from a month ago, you couldn't. Across 19 states are telling the New York Times and other press that they're seeing disturbing DCD cases, including patients whose hearts were still beating when the harvesting began. These people are not brain dead. When we say this, like the circulatory stops, effectively what that means, from my limited research, is if you take the heart off of life support, like you're not resuscitating the heart, and you give it 5 minutes, they're declaring that person dead because the heart stops. However, there are plenty of cases like CPR, right? You jumpstart the heart. Using an AED, you jumpstart the heart. And plenty of people have survived from that. So the difference really that becomes between DCD and a brain death is the action of trying to restart that heart. You can't really pump the head, restart the brain, right? Not necessarily, but you can with the heart. And so you're making a conscious decision not to, or you're not. A doctor is making a conscious decision not to do that.
Look at Damar Hamlin, right? That happened, I don't know, what was this, 4 or 5 years ago at this point? His heart stopped on the field. So I guess on a technical level, that's a circulatory death. But granted, there's a whole other rabbit hole we can go down with that case specifically. A lot of people see, there was a big kind of running joke, and I don't know if you'd call it a joke, but you know what I'm referring to, that it wasn't actually him. But point in case, right, for this topic of discussion, that man's heart stopped beating, and he's not only did he live, but he went on to continue to play in the NFL. And so that's a pretty perfect case right there.
So there's another case that happened in October 2021 that I wanted to bring up that kind of stands out to me here. And I think then we'll start to kind of dive into some of the background parts here. Baptist Health Richmond in Kentucky. There's a guy named TJ Hoover, 33 years old, hospitalized after a drug overdose. Doctors declare him brain dead. His family, of course, is devastated, decides that they're going to declare they're going to donate his organs, do the right thing, try to help somebody else out, especially when you deal with something like a drug overdose. You want to try to make something good out of something bad. So they decide to hold this honor walk, where it's a hospital tradition for those that don't work in the medical field, where staff line the halls in silence and the donor is kind of wheeled into surgery, especially for something of this case where, you're kind of doing the noble thing here. But something happens during this walk. TJ's eyes start opening, and not just opening, but like tracking, right? They're looking around at people. The family is told that, it's just reflexes. It's normal. He's not actually there. You're told this guy's brain dead, but his eyes are moving around and they're looking at people. And you're the family that's walking this kid to get cut open. They wheel him into the operating room and things start getting a little crazier. And Natasha Miller, the transplant coordinator, was in the OR when TJ was brought in, the operating room. She said that he was moving around, kind of like thrashing around in the bed is the exact quote she used. And when she went over there, you could see he had tears coming down. He was visibly crying. 2 surgeons refused to proceed. Here's the kicker. Miller said she overheard the case coordinator from Kentucky owner-donor affiliates call her supervisor for guidance. And the response, keep going. We want those organs. Surgery is eventually canceled, Mr. Phillips, because too many staff members refused. TJ Hoover walked out of the hospital alive. 3 years later, he suffers from PTSD and asks his sister, why did they want my organs?
Dude, that's chilling. That is
Chilling.
that is legitimately gave me the chills, that story. I'm glad I didn't hear that until right now. That's wild.
Have you ever marked off that organ donor
No.
thing on the back of your license?
No, it's that old adage of, hey, don't do that because if they can save you, they won't because they want those organs, right? Like,
It's
everybody
always
kind
been
of knows
a
that.
running joke, yeah.
Exactly. So no,
You know,
I
it's-
am not.
It's funny because early on I did when I first got my license, because I thought, being the noble person is that, like, if something were to happen to me, I'm young, I'm youthful, my body's in great shape, let somebody have this. And along the way, I'd taken it off my license for no real reason, probably because I was getting selfish. I never really thought the conspiracy angle of it. But I think back to a couple of years ago, I had gone into the hospital because my gallbladder was just driving me crazy. I felt like somebody's jabbing me in the stomach. It hurts so badly. And after like 7 days of that, and like kind of like blacking out from the pain, I decided that it was time to listen to my wife and go. In any case, my gallbladder was severely inflamed and they had to put me into emergency surgery to get it removed. And even at the time, they said, it should be a routine surgery, but you don't know. And you kind of go to sleep. And at that point, you don't know what's going to happen, right? You don't know if you're going to even wake up. And when I did, they ended up telling me that, it was a lot worse than they thought. The cut was bigger than they thought they were going to have to make, or that they usually have to make. They're worried, blah, 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 which still a relatively small cut. But I had thought about it at that time, like when I had woken, right? And I had avoided, the whole reason I got to this point to begin with is because I didn't want to go into life. I didn't want to get put to sleep to do something, because I've got that inherent fear of something going wrong.
Scares the hell out of me.
Not even thinking about the organ thing now, right? So something goes wrong and you have an opportunity kind of sitting here where you now know that this person is an organ donor or is willing to donate their organs. Does that change your mind at all? And I guess the bigger question is, why would it change your mind at all? Is there a reason that it would change, that your mind would change if you're in that predicament, if you're in that position to make that decision?
Well, I could tell you exactly what would change your mind. What changes everybody's mind when it comes to being selfish? Money.
Follow the money. Follow
that money. So if you're a bad actor and you're in a position to make a lot of money from harvesting someone's organs, and you don't care about that person's life, you just care about your bank account, well, what happens to that person?
One of the most chilling things about Mariana's docu-series episode in Trafficked was the black market for organ donation, where people are going in to get like a tummy tuck or just like a routine surgery or something like that. Sometimes it was like a dental surgery or something, and they put them under and they like take out a kidney and just like leave them on the table, like bleeding out. But at the end, she hinted at the fact that the black market is really expensive, right? But the regular market, the standard market, there's even more money running through it. So in my research, America's 57 organ procurement organizations are all 501c3 nonprofits, with expenses totaling roughly $3 billion annually, largely covered by taxpayers via Medicare. They're reimbursed for reasonable costs of organ procurement. The expenses are organ procurement I want to make that very clear here because the way it
Right.
reads, it doesn't necessarily sound that. The $3 billion a year they are spending in largely organ procurement. The more organs they recover, the better their performance metrics. The better the metrics, the more funding they get. That's where it starts to get a little bit interesting because in 2020, investigators find that OPOs have greater financial incentives to focus on tissue recovery compared to life-saving organs.
Mm.
Why? Because tissues, skin, bones, corneas are widely profitable on the secondary market, even though the OPOs claim that they're donations. So you now put yourself in the shoes of that person that is not just a doctor, but they are a business owner. They are running a business. And what is the primary objective of running a successful business, Mr. Phillips?
You got to make those greenbacks, baby.
You got to make that money. And so now you're faced with this question is, do I try to do something to save this guy or do I figure out how to make the most out of this situation? I don't know. And I'm going to maybe position this to you a little bit. I don't know that it's always necessarily malicious intent. And actually, I want to retract that almost when I say that. I think back to that case with TJ, right? You see this kid that came in there, overdosed on drugs. You think, guy's a scumbag, threw away his life. I got a chance to make a ton of money off this kid. Probably a good chance he's not going to recover. Let's not even waste any time. Let's just put him right into life. Let me take these things out of here and salvage what I can get. In his case, he ended up waking up and saving himself, but I tend to wonder how many of those come through and the decision is made on a judgment call of how they got there.
Right. Now, look, I'm sure that there are very strict guidelines and procedures and practices that are supposed to be followed, but I mean that's the crux of the whole conspiracy here. Are those followed if there's incentive, if the incentive is greater, right? And who knows? Look, I mean, one thing that we've learned over, over a year of doing this is people will do anything for money. People will do anything for power, and money gets you power, right? So, I think it probably runs a lot deeper than most people would imagine.
Well, there's precedence for that too, right? Because you look at, I don't remember the name of the case. I want to say it was like the night nurse or something like that. And this is a topic for another day as well. But it was basically about that nurse that was intentionally killing people by putting narcotics into their medicine
IV.
bags, or like their saline bags. Yeah, their IV. That's I couldn't think of the word.
Wasn't that here in Jersey too?
That
I'm fairly certain that happened here.
That did happen in New Jersey. Yeah.
It did.
Happened all over the place, but it also happened
Yeah.
here in North New Jersey. Another reason maybe we shouldn't go to North New Jersey hospitals anymore, right? Two reasons right there. There is an unbelievable lack of oversight in hospitals. And I'm not just stating that. There was periods, not just in 2020, but in years beyond that, and before that, where you can go talk to anybody right now that works there now, and if they're honest with you, they'll tell you a lot about the things that you can very easily get away with. We've got a story of somebody that we know through somebody else that was taking morphine left over from really sick patients, slipping it into their bag, taking it home and giving themselves a morphine drip at home as like a drug addict. There's supposed to be two people that sign off on these things and dispose of them, and they're just slipping them out and getting rid of them. And nobody really cares. I don't even notice, it's going to the garbage anyway or whatever. Like, oh, you're taking care of it. Let me just sign off for you. But again, so these aren't isolated incidents. That's a direct story that I know, not first person that we know, but arm's length away. We know it through somebody first person. And when questioning other people in the medical field in similar hospitals or medical practices locally, I mean, they all confirmed, yeah, it's probably pretty simple, especially if the person's on their way out. So there's certainly precedent for there being a lack of oversight and poor decision making that happens. Beyond anecdotally, at least for us, here's where it gets a little interesting. In 2020, again, investigators found that OPOs have greater financial incentive. I'm sorry, I read that already. When the government updated their performance metrics, in 2020, they created a loophole. Pancreata recovered for research, quote unquote, could be counted towards recertification. So since then, pancreata for research by OPOs has increased more than fourfold without any matching increase in the researchers' demands. So what does that mean? They're harvesting organs now that they know won't be used for transplants just to pad their numbers. And remember, again, in New Jersey, right here, investigators found that the NJ sharing network discarded 100 pancreata in one day in March 2024. This is the case that was kind of coming to a head about a month ago.
Right.
But only reported discarding 79 pancreata from 2021 to September 2024. So one day they do 100, and for 3 years, almost 4 years prior, they do less than that, 79. So someone's obviously cooking the books. Government auditing has never really been very good. We found that out with Doge here a little bit. So I mean, it's not totally surprising that the audits kind of missed the fact that Medicare funds are being used for luxury hotel rooms, Rose Bowl festivities, private planes, retreats to 5-star resorts, golf tournaments, football tickets, parade floats. I saw all being reimbursed by the taxpayers and all being funded by these illegal harvesting efforts there. Despite countless issues on recovered organs, mishandled transplants, patient deaths, none of the 57 OPOs operating in the U.S. have ever successfully been decertified by the federal government. Not one, Mr. Phillips. Never.
You know, I don't know. I guess my mind is kind of split. My mind is kind of split between, statistically speaking, how could not one of them ever be decertified, right? Because it doesn't matter what topic you're talking about. When the numbers are large enough, statistically, you're going to find any anomaly that you could potentially find, right? So that's one way of thinking about it. And the other, I don't even want to say practical, but I guess my non-conspiratorial brain is like, all right, but is this actually really happening? Or are these just kind of like weird little one-offs? And, for example, the case that kind of got us talking about this, the patient that they referred to in the letter, there was a bunch of whistleblowers that wrote a letter, and that's how that's the article that I was referring to earlier. They said that the patient reanimated, right? And so what does reanimated actually mean, right? Does it mean that it doesn't necessarily mean that they regained consciousness. Is it brain activity? Is it cardiovascular activity? Is it circulatory activity? We don't really know. It doesn't state that in the letter. But I guess my point is it really truly happening on a large scale basis to people that would otherwise be deemed recoverable, if you will, right? Or is it they reanimated and it was just an involuntary muscle twitch? Or, you know what I mean? Do you get where I'm kind of going with that? What does reanimation actually mean? And so it's a weird thing to think about. That case in, where was it, Kentucky? That's mind-blowing, though. I mean, the fact that the guy legitimately recovered and walked out of the friggin' hospital. I don't know.
I think that's the way they pitch it, though, right? They say that these twitches are just involuntary twitches, and that's the way they sort of like calm your mind. They say that like if you were to work in like a morgue, right? Like a lot of times the bodies come in there and they start twitching afterwards because the body's kind of expelling everything. So there is merit to that, of course. If it was a one-off case, it's one thing. If it was a 2-off case, if it was a 10-off case, if it was a 100-off case, it's a lot more than that, right? And you're seeing these things pop up more and more as this trade, again, for lack of a better word, this trade becomes more popular. We're in an era of longevity, and as surgeries become more accurate, and as people realize that they can live longer by doing crazy things to their body, they are going to do that. I think when you look at who would be on the receiving ends of these types of things, how often does like actually this is probably a bad example given the Jets player Nick Mangold who just passed recently. I think it was Nick
Hmm.
Mangold
Yeah.
by needing a kidney or whatever he had needed. But again, like how often do like celebrities need something and like they're get the transplant right away, or their kid or family member or something like that, or just in general, like how often they get healed? Those are the types of things that I often think about is on a broader scale, not just the organs here, is whenever somebody in the spotlight comes down with a disease, magically they always get cured. And that
Yeah.
bothers me a lot because it
I agree.
shows that we can do it. Now, is it money or is it that we have ways to get access to it, or is it a combination of both? And so when you start to see when you when you leave something up to somebody's opinion, a judgment call, whether this is in medicine or it's in sports. There's always room for error and there's always room for bias. And although you like to think that that person that went through years and years and years of schooling is going to make the right choice, money corrupts. And I mean, you can see that in medical sales. Like, why do people, why do doctors buy certain things, devices, right? Why do they use certain prescriptions? Because they're being paid. Like that's not trivial to say. They're getting paid. And when people go in for medical sales, they're often doing other things off to the side because they can't do it out front, giving gifts or taking people out to dinners or sporting events or whatnot to incentivize them to use their product. So we already know that this happens in devices and medicine and every other aspect. People are influenced by that money. And so now the idea that we now know that organs are being taken when people aren't even ready, and probably in some cases, I wouldn't doubt when people aren't even organ donors because they see something they need and they probably know somebody that's on that list, or a dollar bill comes by them and says, "Hey, if you come across this, here you
Right.
go. Here's 100K that we're going to give you under the table to take care of that." That's the type of stuff that starts to cross my mind and make me really start to question the next time you want to go sit down and get a surgery.
You know what I wonder about? How rampant is this in big cities where homelessness is a really big issue,
Huh?
right? Like LA, New York,
Yep.
Chicago, right? Cities where homeless is a really big issue. If you've got a homeless person in there, no family, to your point about the drug addict earlier, it wouldn't shock me if many of these people that are in these positions of power to make these decisions look at those people just the same as they looked at that kid who OD'd, right? He's got no family, he's a scumbag, lives on the street. I'm gonna make I gotta make some payments on the yacht, baby. I need gas for the boat for the summer, right? And if I take this X organ out of him, well, that's gonna cover all the gas for the boat for the summer. Fine
Yep.
by me.
Yep. Yeah. That's very interesting. And I'm sure that's like a large part of the cases that you'll actually never hear about because these people probably don't have anybody that are championing for them. So unless you get like a
Right.
whistleblower
There's
that's
no
going
one
to
to
come in
tell their
there,
story.
right, right. It's usually going to be a family member that's going to be the one stepping up or speaking out because they feel like something's wrong, and probably looked at like they're crazy. We talked a little bit about the black market before, and I want to kind of touch back on that a little bit here because even if things don't happen, don't happen through quote unquote proper channels, even if they're not supposed to happen, the black market certainly still does exist. The World Health Organization estimates that 10,000 kidneys are traded annually on the black market. The trade generates between 840 million and 1.7 billion dollars in illegal profits each year. So about 12,000 illegal transplants are performed globally each year. It's about 10% of all transplants involve trafficked organs. It's an absurd amount when you think about everything that's going on there. Organ traffickers are operating in complex networks across Asia, Africa, the Middle East, specifically targeting unemployed individuals, migrants, asylum seekers, refugees. Kidneys may be sold for as little as $700, but patients are paying about 180,000 plus for the actual transplant. The difference obviously goes to kidney brokers, harvesting surgeons, and the transplant hospitals. Happens a lot in war zones. So there's some notes here about Syria. Officials estimated up to 20,000 organ sales. So there's incentive there in war as well.
Sure.
And even like supposedly like legitimate systems, the lines blur. In July of 2023, Indonesian police arrested 12 people in sending 122 Indonesians to Cambodia, where their kidneys were harvested. The group had been operating since 2019 and generated about $1.6 billion. Each victim was promised $9,000 for their kidneys. Here's what connects it all back, though, to the U.S. The scarcity. Over 100,000 Americans are waiting for organs right now. We talked about this. When legal channels can't meet the demand, where do people with money go? Transplant tourism. Right. And that's it. They'll travel abroad to find it. And so that's what really, when you see what happens in the black market, that's what, at least for me, kind of green lights the idea of what's happening in the legal market, if you will, where your first option is going to go to that doctor and say, hey, listen, here you go. I'm going to be going overseas to drop $180,000 over there. I'll give you $100,000 right now if you could do it here. And then, at least I've got some protections to a degree. But that doctor can't cherry pick people necessarily. He's still got to wait for somebody to come through his doors that's going to match that lineup. Whereas when you're starting to head overseas, to your point, maybe you can cherry pick from a list of refugees, or you pay some poor guy in the street, tell him to come in for a kidney, and you take something else out of him,
Yeah. I don't want to say, this might sound terrible, but I'll run the risk of just saying it anyway. I almost don't blame some of these people that need these organs. Now, granted, right, I'm not saying that you should sacrifice somebody else's life, right? That's not what I'm saying. I don't agree with that. But just imagine for a second that you're in that scenario where you desperately need an organ and you're on a waiting list and there's 999,000 people ahead of you, and you've got the money to do it. I could see how that temptation would be, could overtake you. No?
Well, I mean, that's the realist take of what our show is, right? Organ donation does save lives. There are tens of thousands of people that are saved every single year because of organ donation. And if I was in that situation, of course, despair would take over. If you have the opportunity to do that, I certainly get that. Again, I don't know that the person seeking the transplant always realizes where it's coming from, right? Like you go and buy a pound of ground beef, you don't know if that cow was slaughtered humanely or if it was inhumanely raised, right? And honestly, you probably don't care because you're hungry. You just want to go make a cheeseburger on the grill. I imagine it's a lot of the same thing, not to downplay the severity or the seriousness of it, but to your point, when you're in that predicament and it's your life or somebody else's, you're not going to think about that other person. And maybe you'll write like a cutesy Facebook post thanking them and talk about how, you guys now share this great spiritual mind, not realizing this guy was just cut open, on a bread basket table. For me, it's the motivating factors, I think, that happen behind the scenes. And if this was all done in a way that was clean and pristine, and I'm sure there's so many ways that the organ donation process could be optimized, which of course it's not, because it's going to be government or it's going to be nonprofits that are just destroyed. And again, once money comes into play, it always just muddies the waters and whatnot. But I think, when your life's on the table, you're willing to do whatever it takes. And I think those people that are the controllers of this know that. And if they can make money off of your despair, they're going to do that. And they don't care what the cost is because it's not their life. Again, like I'll go back to the TJ thing. It's putting myself in those shoes. You're looking at this guy and you're looking at that $100,000 paycheck. Speculation, don't know what it actually would be, but you're looking at that. It's like, man, this guy was a scumbag. This might be his third time in the hospital this year, right? You might not give a shit right? You might not care. Mute that, Mauricio. We don't want to get another flag there, but you might not care. Yeah, it's, oh man, what do you do, right?
I don't know. You know what? And this is the scary part about it. I'm not an organ donor, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean
Not that you know of.
that your organs still can't be harvested, right? God forbid something went wrong. And I'll tell you what, it's, you mentioned it earlier, it scares the hell out of me going under anesthesia, right? Not even thinking about the organ thing, agreed, just like you do. It's just that what if, right? Like, I'm sure many people die every year because of accidents when people are put under anesthesia. And so, what happens if there's just, again, a bad actor and there's nothing going wrong in that surgery at all whatsoever, but maybe they make it go wrong. I'm sure it's very, very, very easy to do. And granted, right, I like to think that an overwhelming majority of people are good, upstanding citizens, and I'm sure 99% of people wouldn't do that, right? I don't want to scare anybody. If you need a surgery, you should probably go get that surgery done. But it does give me a bit of a cause for concern.
Yeah. I mean, once you're on the table, the doctors are making the call. So the best protection is awareness, and everyone's got that like overwhelming cousin, aunt, uncle, brother, sister, what have you, parent that just like nap, 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 whatever something's going on, especially in the doctors. And it probably seems obnoxious, but those are the people you probably want in there with you, right? That person that's going to ask too many questions, that's going to demand transparency, demand answers. They're not just going to accept, oh yeah, it's just like a reflex, right? Like when your loved one's on that table, especially if it's you and their eyes are tracking around, you want that person that's going to be with you there, that's going to be pushing back, not just accept it or not be overwhelmed by the emotion of it, which is hard to do. Bigger picture, reform is always big too. You got these OPOs that have never been decertified despite countless violations, like on the book violations. It's got to change, of course, but we need independent oversight. The government is terrible at that. We need clear definitions of death. You can't just leave it up to somebody to decide, yeah, I'm just not going to resuscitate right now. We're going to call this guy Dunzo after 2 minutes.
Right.
A separation, honestly, be the people declaring the death and the people that are profiting from the organs. And I don't know how you do that in a hospital setting necessarily, because I think that anybody can be impacted and those relationships start to form, but figure out how you can make that separation. But right now, it's the fox guarding the hen house. And sometimes those hens aren't quite dead just yet, Mr. Phillips.
I would agree, my friend. I agree.
So the next time you see that little heart on your driver's license, just remember you're not necessarily agreeing to save lives. You may be entering yourself in a lottery worth billions of dollars. Murky times of death, virtually no accountability. Sweet dreams, Mr. Phillips. You're really going to have fun the next time you head on into that hospital, aren't you?
The wife does want me to get a vasectomy, and one of the reasons, no, I know they don't put you on
to
for the
share that with the
vasectomy,
world.
So I thought, well, whatever. I don't. Just, come on, it's me. You think I have zero shame. But I tell you what, I was recommended that I do get my tonsils taken out, and I don't want to go under, so they're staying in.
Well, that would also impact our podcast, so we better make sure we record a lot of them before you do that, because you won't be talking for a little while. Until then, we'd love to hear what each and every one of you think out there. Comment, like, follow, subscribe. Definitely leave a comment below. Let us know what you think. Have you heard of these stories? Are you working in a hospital or any sort of a medical facility? Have you seen something like this? If you have, we'd be happy to have you on our show. We had Dan O'Connor, who answered our call about taps and ghost hunting just a week ago or 2 weeks ago, depending on when you're watching this. But if you're one of those people too, and you want to kind of blow the whistle a little bit, we're happy to blur out your face and let you kind of share your story a little bit. Happens more than we think. And sometimes it's hard to get that message, that story out there. So by all means, reach out to us. You can do that privately, confidentially through our website, conspiracyrealist.com, where you can also, coincidentally, Mr. Phillips, find us on every single platform. What's your favorite platform, Mr. Phillips? I never asked you that. What's the one you go to for podcasts?
It used to be the Google podcast before they shut that down.
You and me both.
So now I think it's just Spotify, which is weird because I don't use Spotify for music at all.
I don't use it for music at all either, but it's great to become a subscriber or a follower of Cocktails and Conspiracies. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, raise your glass to mysteries. This is another episode of Cocktails and Conspiracies. So long, everybody.